Hi everyone, today's story is called Mrs. Pepperpot Learns to Swim. There's lots of these books about an old lady that can shrink and grow whenever or not so conveniently. In the warm weather, Mrs. Pepperpot always walked through the woods when she went shopping. In the middle of the wood was a large pool where the village children swam. They splashed about and raced each other up and down. Mrs. Pepperpot always stopped to watch, and she would sigh to herself and think, if only I could do that, because nobody had taught her how to swim when she was a little girl. One day when she got home, she decided to practice swimming in the kitchen. She balanced herself on her tummy on the kitchen stool, but when she flung out her arms, she knocked a saucepan of soup off of the stove. Every night she would dream about swimming. One night she dreamed she could do the breaststroke. She stretched her arms forwards, bent her knees, and then wham! One foot almost kicked a hole in the wall. The other knocked Mr. Pepperpot out of bed. "What's the matter with you?" said Mr. Pepperpot. "I'm swimming," answered Mrs. Pepperpot, who was still half asleep. "It's the most wonderful feeling." "Well, it's not wonderful for me, I can tell you," said Mr. Pepperpot crossly. Then came a bright, warm day when all the village children were going on a picnic in the mountains. "That's good," thought Mrs. Pepperpot. "There'll be no children in the pond today, and I'll have a chance to learn how to swim." And she walked through the wood to the pool. It certainly looked inviting, with the sun shining down through the trees and making pretty patterns on the water. She sat down on the soft grass, took off her shoes and stockings. Peering over the edge, she could see the water was very shallow. So she stood up and said to herself, "All right, Mrs. P, here goes," and she jumped in. Just as that moment, she shrank. Now, of course, the pool seemed like an ocean to tiny Mrs. Pepperpot. "Help, help!" she cried. "Hold on," said a deep, throaty voice from below, and a large frog swam smoothly towards her. "You should never jump in a pool without someone to look out for you," he said. "Now get on my back." And he swam to a rock so Mrs. Pepperpot could catch her breath. "You are a very good swimmer," said Mrs. Pepperpot. The frog puffed himself up importantly. "I'm the best swimming teacher in this pool," he said. "Do you think you could teach me how to swim?" asked Mrs. Pepperpot. "Of course. We'll begin right away. Frogs are very good at the breaststroke. Climb on my back and watch what I do." Mrs. Pepperpot watched how the frog moved his arms and legs in time. Then he found her a little piece of floating wood and told her to hang on. And she pushed along with her legs, just like the frog had done. After a while, she found herself swimming along without the piece of wood. "Yippee!" she shouted in excitement. But the frog, who had been swimming close to her all the time, came up behind her and lifted her onto his back. "That's enough for the moment," he said, and took her back to the rock to rest. Mrs. Pepperpot was feeling pleased with herself. She wanted to carry on and learn how to do the front crawl. "Not so fast, my dear," the frog said. "You must keep practicing before you do other things. But I'll get my tadpoles to give you a show of water acrobatics. How's that?" "That would be wonderful," said Mrs. Pepperpot. "Come on, children," he croaked. "I want you to show this lady all your tricks." First, the tadpole swam to the top of the water. Then they dived down to the bottom. Then they wove in and out of the reeds in a beautiful pattern. And then, like aeroplanes do in acrobatics, they rolled over and did a loop-the-loop. The frog had puffed himself up with so much he was nearly bursting with pride. Mrs. Pepperpot was just standing up to cheer the tadpoles when she found herself rolling about in what seemed more like a puddle than a deep pool. She had grown back to her normal size again. As she picked herself up and waded out of the water to the bank, she saw no sign of the frog or the tadpoles, so she quickly hurried home. A few days passed before Mrs. Pepperpot got a chance to go back to the pool. But before she knew it, she was swimming along and feeling very proud. Then she saw that she was being followed. There was the frog, and behind him were all the tadpoles. The frog came to the top of the water and gave a loud ribbit. "Thanks, Mr. Frog," said Mrs. Pepperpot. "You're the best swimming teacher in the whole world." "I told you so," said the frog, and with an elegant kick of his back legs, he did a nosedive down into the pool, and all of the tadpoles followed him. Ah, what a nice story. And it is tricky learning to swim, isn't it? It does take a long time. So what I thought you could try today is imagine if you, like Mrs. Pepperpot, shrank down to the size of a small thing. And what sorts of adventures might you have? What animals might you meet? Where might you go? What might you do? I'd love to see what you come up with later on today. So have a great day. Take some time outside if you can, because it's another lovely sunny day. And I will see you tomorrow for another story. Bye, everyone.